Hiya, I'm Peter Welsh and I've done a lot of history about Washington, and particularly with regard to the Great War. And obviously in studying the Great War that throws up all kinds of other things and about the people involved in those stories. So I'm going to tell you a story today about a lady called Margaret Konig. Margaret Konig was the wife of a pork butcher. She was Margaret Rattray when she was born. Her parents were Gilbert and Sophia. And interestingly, for the story that's about to come, she had a brother called Adelheid, which is an unusual name for a brother in Washington in the 1890s. Anyway, Margaret married a German pork butcher called Johann Friedrich Konig in 1909, probably in the church on the hill, just behind us here as we speak. They had no children, but she ran the butcher shop with her husband and with a man called Ernest Russ, who was a German, and also with one of her brothers, Gilbert. When the war began, because of perhaps natural xenophobia and fears about German spies and aliens, you may regard that as being similar to today, when we have immigrants crossing the channel and xenophobes get themselves worked up about it. So anyway, because of that xenophobia and fear, I should say that Margaret had been married in 1909, but had lived here all her life. She was born here. Again, just in a Google search this morning, I came across a cartoon from Punch. And cartoons from Punch often tell you a great deal about the atmosphere at the time. And it's a middle class or upper middle class English family sitting at breakfast. And the little girl says to her mother, "Mother, does this mean we shall have to kill Fraulein?" Fraulein being their nanny, who was in the background making their breakfast. When the war began in 1914, there were quite a number of pork butchers across the country, and many of them had come from Hohenlohe in Germany. Believe it or not, they still have reunions of the relatives of German pork butchers, and you can read about that on Durham at War. There's a website, Durham County Archive, or you could read about it in a book by Sue Gibbons, who's written about the German pork butchers. Anyway, the windows in their butcher shop at Speculation Place, just up the road here, again, just up Spout Lane, Speculation Place, they were smashed and there was trouble. And because of the fear of enemy aliens, Johann Friedrich Konig was interned. He was interned on the Isle of Man at a place called Knockerlow, and he died there in 1919. At the end of the war, Margaret, married to a German who had now died, so the widow of a German pork butcher, had to be renaturalised. And so in the National Archives in Kew, there are papers concerning Margaret Konig's effort to become British again. Having been married to a German, she was no longer considered to be British. In order to get that renaturalisation, she had to have various people involved. Inspector Carruthers of Felling stated that the 3 testimonials that had been given were from good people, honest people, truthful people, and they had known Margaret since she was born here in Washington. Anyway, to cut a long story short, she was renaturalised and became a British citizen again.
So Peter, I'm trying to anticipate what other people are going to ask on this, and I do think that somebody is likely to ask about the extent of this kind of occurrence. Was it really unusual? Was it not so?
Right. In a 5-minute Google search this morning, before I came here to talk about this, I discovered that, and Sue Gibbons' book will tell you more about it, there was a pork butcher in Shadforth, there were pork butchers in Washington, there were pork butchers in Keighley and in Sunderland and in Hull and in Middlesbrough. They seemed to be concentrated in the north. And what I think had happened was, in the same way as Oz and the boys from Auf Wiedersehen Pet would go to Germany and come back and say, there are jobs in Germany, lads, and so English lads would go across to be British in Germany. the fact that some pork butchers from Hohenlohe had been successful meant that others were happy to come over here. And this went on throughout the 19th century, from about the 1840s, I think, in a brief reading this morning. And what happened was that the word got back to Hohenlohe, and so boys who were unable to find other work, there were training courses to turn them into pork butchers. There were issues about primogeniture, which meant that in Germany, you could only leave your land or your business, I think, to your eldest son. So there were a lot of boys who were looking for work, and they trained them to be pork butchers and said, go to England. They love German pork butchers in England. And so that's what they did. So they were all over the north, as I understand it.